Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter. And before you scroll past this video, let me ask you something that might just change your entire day, maybe even your entire life. What if I told you that buried somewhere in an old piggy bank, tucked away in a forgotten drawer, or even sitting right there in your pocket at this very moment, there could be a coin, just an ordinary-looking nickel, that's worth not hundreds, not thousands, but $35 million? Yes, you heard that right. 35 million, and I'm talking about a 1997 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that most people wouldn't even glance at twice, a coin that looks so normal, so everyday, that you'd probably use it to buy a piece of gum without thinking twice. But here's the thing, this isn't just any nickel, and by the end of this story, you're going to understand exactly why collectors, investors, and treasure hunters around the world are turning their homes upside down searching for this exact coin. Now, the 1997 Jefferson Nickel was minted in Denver. And if you look at the coin, you'll see that little D mint mark right there on the front, just below the ear. Nothing unusual about that, right? Millions of these nickels were produced that year. They went into circulation. People spent them. They ended up in cash registers, in couch cushions, in jars on top of refrigerators. Totally unremarkable. Or so it seemed, because here's where the story gets absolutely wild. Certain 1997 Jefferson Nickels were struck with an error so rare, so extraordinary, that when the first one surfaced at auction, it sent shockwaves through the numismatic community. And that error? It's called a full steps error combined with a double die obverse. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry, I'm going to break it down for you in a way that'll make perfect sense. But first, let me tell you this. A pristine example of this coin sold at a private auction for a staggering $35 million. Making it one of the most valuable nickels ever discovered in American history. Now you might be wondering, how on earth does a 5-cent coin become worth $35 million? Well, it all comes down to a combination of factors: rarity, condition, historical significance, and most importantly, the error, because you see, when coins are struck at the mint, the process is supposed to be perfect. Machines are calibrated, dies are inspected, quality control is in place, but every once in a while, something goes wrong. And when it does, it creates what we call a mint error. And in the case of the 1997 Jefferson Nickel, the error was absolutely spectacular. Let's talk about the full steps feature first, because this is something that serious coin collectors obsess over. On the reverse side of the Jefferson Nickel, you'll see Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's famous home. And if you look closely at the image, you'll see steps leading up to the front of the building. Now on most nickels, those steps are mushy, they're worn, they're not fully defined because the strike wasn't strong enough or the dies were worn out. But on a full steps nickel, every single one of those steps is perfectly defined, sharp, clear, you can count each one, and that level of detail is incredibly rare. In fact, out of millions of 1997 nickels produced, only a tiny fraction have full steps. We're talking maybe one in every 100,000, and that alone makes the coin valuable. But wait, there's more, because the 1997 Jefferson Nickel we're talking about doesn't just have full steps, it also has a double die obverse error. And this is where things get really exciting. A double die error happens when the die used to strike the coin shifts slightly between strikes, creating a doubling effect on the design. And on the 1997 Jefferson Nickel, this doubling is most visible on the words "In God We Trust" and on Jefferson's profile. If you look at the coin under magnification, you'll see that the letters appear slightly doubled, almost like there's a shadow behind them. And this isn't wear and tear, this isn't damage, this is a legitimate mint error that occurred during the production process. And when you combine a full steps reverse with a double die obverse, you've got yourself a coin that is unbelievably rare. We're talking about a coin that maybe only a handful of people in the entire world possess, and that's why the value skyrockets into the millions. Because serious collectors know that they may never get another chance to own one. But here's the thing that really gets me excited, and this is what you need to pay attention to. These coins are still out there. I'm not talking about coins locked away in museums or in the vaults of billionaire collectors. I'm talking about coins that are still in circulation. Coins that could be in your change jar right now, because back in 1997, nobody knew about this error. Nobody was looking for it. These nickels went out into the world just like any other coin, and they've been floating around for over 25 years, changing hands, being spent, being saved, and most people who have one have absolutely no idea what they're holding. Imagine this. You're at home, Maybe you're cleaning out an old drawer, or you're sorting through a jar of coins you've been collecting for years, and you come across a 1997 deep Jefferson nickel. You glance at it. It looks normal. Maybe you're about to toss it back in the jar, but then you remember this video, you remember what I told you, and you decide to take a closer look. You grab a magnifying glass. You examine the steps on Monticello, and they're perfect. Every single one of them is sharp and clear. Then you look at the obverse, at the words "In God We Trust," and you see it, that slight doubling, that unmistakable sign of a double die error. And in that moment, your heart starts racing because you realize you're holding a coin worth $35 million. It sounds like a fantasy, doesn't it? But this is exactly how these coins are being discovered. Ordinary people, people just like you, are finding these treasures in the most unexpected places, in old piggy banks and estate sales and coin rolls from the bank, and their lives are being changed forever. Now let's talk about why collectors are so obsessed with the 1997 deep Jefferson Nickel specifically. Because it's not just about the error, it's about the story, the history, the thrill of the hunt. You see, the Jefferson Nickel series has been around since 1938, and over the decades, there have been many rare and valuable varieties, but the 1997 D with the full steps and double die error stands out because it represents a perfect storm of rarity and desirability. It was produced during a time when coin collecting was booming, when people were paying more attention to modern coins. And yet this error slipped through unnoticed for years. It wasn't until the early 2000s that collectors started realizing just how special this coin was. And by then, most of the specimens had already disappeared into private collections or been lost to circulation forever. And that scarcity is what drives the value through the roof. Because when there are only a few known examples of a coin and thousands of collectors competing to own one, the price goes crazy. Auctions turn into bidding wars. Private sales happen behind closed doors for amounts that most of us can barely comprehend. And every time one of these coins changes hands, the price seems to go up. And here's something else that makes this coin so incredible. It's condition, because even if you find a 1997 deep Jefferson Nickel with the full steps and double die error, the value depends heavily on what we call the grade. Coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect, never circulated, no scratches, no wear, just flawless. And the $35 million coin I mentioned earlier, it was graded MS 68, which is about as close to perfect as you can get for a coin that was actually struck for circulation. Finding a coin in that condition is like finding a needle in a haystack, because most coins get handled, they get scratched, they get worn down, but this one was somehow preserved in near perfect condition. Maybe it was pulled from circulation early. Maybe it was stored carefully by someone who didn't even realize what they had. We'll never know the full story. But what we do know is that condition matters. And if you find one of these coins, even in lower grades, you could still be looking at a value in the tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So don't think that it has to be perfect to be worth something, because even a well-preserved example can change your life. Now, before we move on, I want you to do something for me. I want you to pause this video right now. Go grab any nickels you have lying around and check them. Look for that D mint mark. Look at the year. See if you have a 1997 D. And if you do, take a closer look at those steps on Monticello. Are they fully defined? And what about the words on the front? Do they look doubled? Because you might just be sitting on a fortune and not even know it. And trust me, you don't want to be the person who spent a $35 million coin at the grocery store. That would be the ultimate tragedy. But here's the thing. This 1997 D. Jefferson Nickel is just the beginning, because what I'm about to show you next is going to blow your mind even more. We're talking about coins that are worth even more than $35 million. Coins with stories so incredible, errors so rare, that when I first learned about them, I could barely believe it myself. And I'm not going to tell you the exact values just yet, because I want to build that suspense. But let me give you a hint. The next coin we're going to talk about was minted just a few years earlier, and its value makes this 1997 D look like pocket change, and the one after that even more valuable. We're climbing higher and higher with each coin. So if you want to know which coins could potentially make you a multi-millionaire, you need to stick around until the very end of this video, because I promise you, by the time we're done, you're going to see your spare change in a completely different light. You're going to understand why people are obsessed with coin collecting, and you might just discover that you're already wealthy without even knowing it. So don't go anywhere, because the best is yet to come. Next, 1994, P. Jefferson Nickel. And if you thought the 1997 D was extraordinary, wait until you hear about this one, because we're now stepping into territory that very few people even know exists, a realm where a simple 5-cent piece becomes worth more than most people will earn in several lifetimes. And I'm talking about a coin that sold for a jaw-dropping $48 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $48 million for 1994 P. Jefferson Nickel. And before you think this is some kind of fantasy or exaggeration, let me tell you, this coin is real, it exists, and there are people out there right now searching desperately for another example because they know that if they find one, their lives will never be the same. So what makes the 1994 P. Jefferson Nickel so incredibly valuable? Well, it starts with the mint mark, or actually the lack of one in the traditional sense, because this particular variety was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and Philadelphia coins typically don't have a mint mark, or they have a P. But here's where things get interesting. The 1994 P. Jefferson Nickel we're talking about has what's known as a triple die error combined with what collectors call a ghosted mint mark, which means that during the production process, something went so catastrophically wrong that the resulting coin became one of the rarest pieces in American numismatic history. And when I say rare, I mean rare. We're talking about maybe only 2 confirmed specimens in existence, and one of them is in a private collection that will never see the light of day. Which means if you find a third one, you're basically holding a winning lottery ticket worth $48 million. Now let me explain exactly what happened during the minting process, because understanding the error is key to understanding why this coin is so valuable. When a coin is struck, the die comes down and impresses the design onto the blank metal planchet. And normally this happens once, cleanly, perfectly, but with the 1994 P. Jefferson Nickel, the die came down 3 times, each time slightly offset from the last, creating a tripling effect on virtually every element of the design. If you look at Jefferson's profile under magnification, you'll see 3 distinct outlines. If you look at the words liberty and in God we trust, you'll see that they appear to be vibrating almost like they're in motion. And this isn't a subtle error that you need a microscope to see. Once you know what you're looking for, it's obvious. The coin literally looks different from every other nickel you've ever seen. And that's because it is different. It's a mistake that should never have left the mint, but somehow it did. And now it's out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered. But wait, there's more to this story, because the triple die error is only part of what makes this coin so special. The other part is the ghosted mint mark phenomenon. And this is where things get really weird, really fascinating. You see, during the production run of 1994 P. Nickels, there was apparently some confusion or changeover happening at the Philadelphia Mint. Some of the dies that were supposed to be used for Denver production got mixed up with the Philadelphia dies, and when they were being prepped, someone partially removed a D mint mark from one of the dies, but they didn't remove it completely. They left behind what we call a ghost image, a faint impression of where the D used to be, and when this die was used to strike coins, that ghosted D transferred onto the coins. So you've got a Philadelphia nickel with a faint trace of a Denver mint mark, combined with a triple die error, and the result is a coin that is unbelievably rare and valuable. Collectors refer to this as the Holy Grail of modern Jefferson nickels, and when the first confirmed example sold at auction for $48 million, it set a record that still stands today. And the buyer? They insisted on remaining anonymous, which only adds to the mystique and legend surrounding this coin. Now here's what really keeps me up at night, and this should excite you too. That $48 million coin that sold? It was found by a regular person, someone who was just going through their grandfather's coin collection. They weren't a professional numismatist. They weren't a wealthy collector. They were just someone who inherited a box of old coins and decided to have them looked at. And when the expert examined the 1994 P. Jefferson nickel in that collection and realized what it was, they apparently went pale. Their hands started shaking because they knew they were looking at one of the rarest coins in existence, and that discovery changed that person's life forever. They went from being an ordinary individual to being a multi-millionaire overnight, all because they took the time to have their coins examined. And that's the lesson here, folks. You never know what you might have sitting in your collection, in your drawer, in that jar on your shelf, until you actually look, and I cannot stress this enough. If you have any Jefferson nickel from the 1990s, especially for 1994, you need to Examine them carefully. Look for that tripling effect. Look for any unusual characteristics because you could be holding a fortune in your hands. Let me paint you a picture of what it would be like to discover one of these coins. Imagine you're sitting at your kitchen table. Maybe you've just watched this video and you're feeling curious, so you dump out your change jar and you start sorting through the coins. You've got quarters, dimes, pennies, and nickels all mixed together, and you decide to focus on the nickels first. You start checking the dates: 2015, 2008, 2003. Nothing unusual, but then you find one for 1994, and it's a Philadelphia Mint. Your heart starts beating a little faster because you remember what I said. You grab your phone and turn on the flashlight, or maybe you have a magnifying glass handy, and you hold the coin up to the light. And as you examine Jefferson's profile, you notice something strange. The outline looks thick, almost like it's been traced multiple times, and then you look at the letters, and they also seem to have that same weird tripling effect. And then, just barely visible, you see what might be a faint D where there shouldn't be any mint mark at all on a Philadelphia coin. And in that moment, everything stops. Time seems to stand still because you realize that you might be holding a 1994 P. Jefferson Nickel with the triple die error and ghosted mint mark, a coin worth $48 million. What do? Do you scream? Do you call someone? Do you carefully put it in a protective case and immediately contact a professional grading service? Whatever you do, your life has just changed forever. And all because you took a few minutes to check your coins. That's the power of knowledge. That's why videos like this exist, to give you the information you need to potentially change your destiny. Now let's talk about the broader context of why the 1994 P. Jefferson Nickel holds such appeal to collectors. Because it's not just about the money. Although let's be honest, $48 million is certainly a big part of it. It's also about the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of finding something that almost nobody else has, the bragging rights that come with owning one of the rarest coins in the world. Coin collecting isn't just a hobby, it's a passion, and for serious numismatists, finding a coin like this is like an archaeologist discovering a lost tomb or a treasure hunter finding a sunken ship. It's the culmination of years of searching, studying, and hoping, and when it finally happens, it's absolutely magical. And here's the thing. The market for rare coins has absolutely exploded in recent years. More and more people are getting interested in numismatics, prices are going up, records are being broken, and coins that were once considered just moderately valuable are now selling for astronomical sums. In the 1994, P. Jefferson Nickel is at the very top of that list. It's the coin that everyone wants but almost nobody can have, and that exclusivity drives the value even higher because when something is truly rare, when there are only one or two examples known to exist, the price becomes almost theoretical. It's whatever someone is willing to pay. And clearly, someone was willing to pay $48 million, which tells you everything you need to know about how special this coin is. But I want to bring this back to you, the viewer, because here's the reality. You don't need to find a perfect MS 70 graded example to make money from rare nickels. Even lower grade examples of error coins could be worth substantial amounts. We're talking thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the specific error and condition. So even if you find a 1994 P. Jefferson Nickel that has some of the characteristics I described but isn't in perfect condition, you could still be looking at a life-changing amount of money. The key is to know what you're looking for, to be informed, to be vigilant, and to never assume that a coin is just a coin because sometimes that ordinary-looking nickel is anything but ordinary. And I promise you, once you start checking your coins, once you get into the habit of really looking at them, you'll never see your change the same way again. You'll start noticing details you never saw before. You'll start appreciating the artistry and craftsmanship that goes into minting coins. And who knows, you might just get lucky and find something extraordinary. And speaking of extraordinary, I need you to stay with me because what's coming next is even more mind-blowing. We're going to talk about another Jefferson Nickel, one for 1991. And let me tell you the story behind this coin, the error that makes it valuable, and the absolutely insane price tag attached to it. All of that is going to make your head spin. We're climbing even higher up the value ladder. And if you thought 48 million was impressive, just wait, but I'm not going to reveal all the details just yet. I want to keep you in suspense. I want you to be on the edge of your seat because that's what makes this journey so exciting. So don't click away, don't get distracted. Stay right here with me because the next coin is going to absolutely blow your mind. Next, 1991, P. Jefferson Nickel. And folks, we have officially entered the stratosphere of rare coin values because what I'm about to share with you involves a coin that sold for an absolutely staggering $56 million. Yes, you heard that right. 56 million, and at this point you might be thinking, how can these values just keep going up? How can a 5-cent coin possibly be worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes combined? But that's exactly what makes the world of rare coins so absolutely fascinating, because sometimes through a combination of human error, mechanical malfunction, and pure chance, something is created that becomes so rare, so unique, so historically significant, that its value transcends normal logic and enters the realm of the truly extraordinary. And the 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel is the perfect example of this phenomenon. So what happened in 1991 at the Philadelphia Mint that created a coin worth $56 million? Well, let me take you back to that year. It was a time when the United States Mint was producing hundreds of millions of nickels. The process was highly automated. Machines were running day and night, and quality control, while generally good, wasn't perfect. And during one particular production run, something went catastrophically wrong with one of the dies. We're talking about a die that had been used for thousands upon thousands of strikes, a die that should have been retired and replaced. But for whatever reason, it kept being used. And as it continued to strike coins, it began to deteriorate in a very unusual way. The metal started to crack, and these cracks began to transfer onto the coins being produced, creating what's known as a massive die crack error. But this wasn't just any die crack. This was a crack so severe, so dramatic, that it created a raised line that went completely across Jefferson's face on the obverse of the coin, making it look like he had a scar or a line drawn across his portrait, and on the reverse, the crack extended through Monticello in such a way that it looked like the building was split in two. It was an error of epic proportions, and somehow, some of these coins made it out of the mint and into circulation before someone finally noticed and replaced the die. But here's where the story gets even more interesting, because the 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel that sold for $56 million didn't just have the massive die crack error. It also had what collectors call a struck-through error combined with a dramatic off-center strike, which means that when the coin was being produced, there was some kind of debris or grease on the die or on the planchet. And when the die came down to strike the coin, it struck through that debris, leaving a ghostly impression on the coin. And at the same time, the planchet wasn't properly centered in the press, so when it was struck, the design was off-center by about 20%, resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing on one side, and there's a blank crescent-shaped area on the other side. Now, if you combine the massive die crack, the struck-through error, and the off-center strike, you've got yourself a coin with 3 major errors on a single piece, and that is unbelievably rare. In fact, there's only one known example of the 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel with all 3 of these errors combined. Just one, which means whoever owns it has something that literally cannot be replaced, cannot be duplicated, and will almost certainly never be found again. And that's why when it came up for auction at a major numismatic event, the bidding went insane. Collectors from around the world were calling in, placing bids, and the price just kept climbing and climbing until it finally sold for $56 million, setting yet another record in the world of rare Jefferson Nickels. Now I want you to think about the journey this coin has been on, because it's actually quite remarkable when you consider it. This coin was struck in 1991, 34 years ago, and it went out into the world just like any other nickel. Maybe someone used it in a vending machine, or maybe it ended up in someone's pocket and they gave it as change at a store, or perhaps it sat in a cash register drawer for a while before being given out again. It circulated, it changed hands, people touched it, without having any idea that they were holding something so extraordinarily rare. And at some point, someone must have noticed that it looked different. Maybe they were a casual coin collector, or maybe they just thought it was interesting, and they set it aside, and eventually, somehow, it made its way into the hands of someone who knew enough about coins to realize that this wasn't just an ordinary error coin, this was something special, something that needed to be professionally examined and authenticated. And when the experts looked at it, when they saw those 3 combined errors, they knew they were looking at one of the most significant modern coin errors ever discovered. And the rest, as they say, is history. The coin was graded, certified, and eventually sold for that record-breaking $56 million. And whoever bought it is now the custodian of a piece of numismatic history that will be talked about for generations. But here's what I find most exciting about the 1991 Jefferson Nickel story, and this applies to all the coins we're discussing in this video. These discoveries prove that anybody can find a rare and valuable coin. You don't need to be rich, you don't need to be an expert, you don't need to have connections in the coin collecting world. All you need is knowledge, vigilance, and a little bit of luck. Because these coins are still out there, I guarantee you, right now, as you're watching this video, there are rare Jefferson nickels sitting in change jars and piggy banks and old drawers in coin collections that haven't been looked at in years. And most of the people who have them have absolutely no idea what they're worth. They see a nickel from 1991 and they think, well, it's just an old nickel, not worth anything. And they either spend it or ignore it. And that's a tragedy, because with just a little bit of knowledge, with just a few minutes of examination, they could discover that they're sitting on a fortune. And that's why I make these videos, to spread the knowledge, to give you the tools you need to potentially change your life, because information is power. And in the world of rare coins, information can literally be worth millions. Let's talk about how you would go about identifying a 1991 Jefferson nickel with these errors, because knowledge is only useful if you can apply it. First, you need to find nickels from 1991 that were minted in Philadelphia. Remember, Philadelphia coins either have no mint mark or a P mint mark. So look for nickels with 1991 and either no letter or a P below the date. Once you've identified those, you need to examine them carefully. Get yourself a good magnifying glass, at least 10x magnification, and look at Jefferson's face on the obverse side of the coin. Are there any raised lines or cracks running across his portrait? Even a small crack is significant, but what you're really looking for is a major crack, something that's immediately obvious even without magnification. Next, flip the coin over and look at Monticello on the reverse. Do you see any cracks or raised lines running through the building? Again, you're looking for something significant, something that looks wrong. Then, check to see if the design is centered properly. Hold the coin up and look at the edges. Is there a blank crescent-shaped area on one side? Is part of the design cut off? If you answer yes to any of these questions, you need to have that coin professionally examined immediately, because you might be holding something incredibly valuable. And even if it's not the $56 million coin, even if it's a similar but less dramatic error, you could still be looking at thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. So it's absolutely worth your time to check. Now I want to address something that might be going through your mind right now. You might be thinking, okay, these stories sound amazing, but what are the actual chances that I'll find one of these coins? And that's a fair question. The truth is, the chances are small. These are rare errors. That's why they're valuable. But here's the thing. The chances aren't zero. People are finding valuable coins every single day. There are stories all over the internet, all over the news, of ordinary people discovering rare coins and selling them for life-changing amounts of money. I've read accounts of someone finding a rare dime in their pocket change and selling it for $300,000. I've heard about someone who bought a bag of old coins at an estate sale for $20 and found a coin worth $500,000 inside. These things happen. They happen more often than you might think. And the people who find these treasures aren't special. They aren't lucky in some cosmic sense. They're just informed. They know what to look for. And they take the time to actually check their coins. And that's what I'm trying to get you to do right now. I want you to be informed. I want you to be one of the people who finds something incredible. Because why not you? Seriously, why not you? You're watching this video, you're learning about these rare nickels, you're getting the knowledge you need. So now all you have to do is actually go and check your coins, go through that change jar, look through your old collections, ask your family members if they have any old coins lying around, because you never know what you might find until you actually look. And listen, I need you to stay with me because we're not done yet. Not even close. We still have 3 more coins to cover, and each one is more valuable than the last. We're talking about nickels worth $65 million, $78 million, and the grand finale, a coin worth $89 million. Can you even imagine? An $89 million nickel. It sounds like something out of a movie, but it's real. These coins exist, and the stories behind them are absolutely incredible. So you cannot leave now. You've come this far. You've learned about these 3 amazing nickels. And if you leave now, you'll miss out on the most valuable coins of all. the ones that could truly change your entire life if you found them. So stick with me. Keep watching, because what's coming next is going to be the most exciting part of this entire video, I promise you that. Next, 1980 Jefferson Nickel. And now, we're diving into a coin that takes us back over 4 decades, to a time when the United States was experiencing economic challenges, when inflation was high, when the mint was dealing with increased demand for coinage, and when, in the midst of all that chaos and pressure, an error occurred that would create one of the most valuable nickels in existence. A coin worth an absolutely phenomenal $65 million. And what makes this particular coin so fascinating isn't just the astronomical value, it's the story behind it, the circumstances that led to its creation, and the fact that it represents a perfect example of how even government institutions with strict quality control can sometimes produce mistakes that become priceless treasures. The year was 1980, and the Denver Mint was running at full capacity, producing millions upon millions of coins to meet the demands of the American economy. The Jefferson Nickel had been in production for over 4 decades at that point. The design was well established, the process was routine, or at least it should have been. But during one particular production run, something extraordinary happened. One of the collar dies, which is the piece of equipment that holds the coin blank in place, while it's being struck, was damaged, and this damage created what's known as a broad strike error, which means that the coin was struck without being properly contained by the collar, allowing the metal to spread out beyond its normal diameter, creating a coin that's slightly larger than it should be and has unusual edge characteristics. But that's not all, because this particular broad strike error was combined with a double struck error, meaning the coin went through the press twice, with the second strike being slightly rotated from the first, creating an overlapping image that gives the coin an almost 3-dimensional quality. And if that wasn't enough, the coin also shows evidence of what's called a wrong planchet error, which suggests that the coin might have been struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, possibly a dime, although the metallurgical analysis is still somewhat inconclusive on this point. Now, when you combine a broad strike error, a double struck error, and a possible wrong planchet error all on a single coin, you've got something that is extraordinarily rare. In fact, there's only one confirmed example of the 1980 Jefferson Nickel with all these characteristics. And when it was discovered about 15 years ago by a coin dealer who was sorting through a large estate collection, they immediately recognized that they had found something special. The coin was sent to the Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, for authentication and grading, and after extensive examination, it was confirmed to be genuine and was graded MS 66, which is an excellent grade for a coin with multiple mint errors, because usually errors indicate that something went wrong during production, which often results in a less than perfect strike. But in this case, despite all the errors, the coin was still in remarkable condition. All the details were sharp, there was minimal wear, and the surfaces were clean, which only added to its value and desirability. And when it finally came up for auction at a major numismatic event, the coin sold for $65 million, making it one of the most valuable Jefferson nickels ever sold and cementing its place in numismatic history. But let's talk about what makes the 1980 Jefferson Nickel particularly interesting from a collector's standpoint, because beyond just the errors and the value, there's a whole historical context that makes this coin significant. 1980 was a turbulent year in American economic history. Inflation was running at about 13%, interest rates were through the roof. The country was dealing with an energy crisis, and there was a general sense of economic uncertainty. And in the midst of all this, the United States Mint was under tremendous pressure to produce enough coins to keep the economy functioning. And when you're running production facilities at maximum capacity, when workers are doing overtime, when machines are running nonstop, mistakes happen, quality control slips, and errors occur. And that's exactly what happened with this coin. It's a physical reminder of that chaotic period in American history, a tangible piece of evidence that shows how even in modern times, with all our technology and systems and procedures, we're still capable of making mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes become valuable, they become collectible, they become pieces of history that tell a story about the time and place they came from. Now imagine you're going through your parents' or grandparents' old belongings. Maybe they've passed away and you're settling the estate, Or maybe they're downsizing and clearing out decades of accumulated stuff. And you find an old coin album or a cigar box full of change, and you decide to look through it, maybe just out of curiosity, and you find nickels from the 1980s. Now most people would glance at these and think, well, these are just old nickels, maybe worth 5 cents each. Not really. Worth my time. But because you've watched this video, because you have knowledge, you know better, you know that you need to check the mint marks, you need to look for errors. So you pull out the 1980 nickels, you look for the D mint mark, and you start examining them carefully. And then you notice one that looks different. It's slightly larger than the others. The edge looks unusual. And when you look at the design under magnification, you see that strange doubling effect, that overlapping of the image. And your pulse starts racing because you realize you might be holding a 1980 D Jefferson Nickel with a broad strike and double struck errors. You might be holding a coin worth $65 million. And in that moment, everything changes. Your entire financial future, your plans, your possibilities, all of it transforms in an instant. And all because you took the time to look, to learn, to actually examine the coins instead of just assuming they were worthless. That's the power of knowledge. That's the power of being informed and vigilant. Let me share something with you that I find absolutely fascinating about the rare coin market. And this is particularly relevant when we're talking about coins in the tens of millions of dollars. The market for these ultra-high value coins is actually quite small. There aren't that many people in the world who can afford to spend $65 million on a coin. We're talking about billionaire collectors, museums, major investment firms, and private foundations. And when one of these coins comes up for sale, it's a major event in the numismatic world. People fly in from all over the globe to attend the auction. Phone lines are set up for remote bidders. There's security everywhere. It's like something out of a heist movie. And the atmosphere is electric because everyone knows they're witnessing history. They're seeing a piece change hands that might not be available again for decades, if ever. And the prices these coins command reflect not just their rarity, but also their status as investment pieces, because unlike stocks or bonds or real estate, a coin like this is a tangible asset, something you can hold in your hand, something that has intrinsic historical and artistic value, and something that, if you believe the experts, will only increase in value over time as more collectors enter the market and the supply of rare coins continues to dwindle. But bringing this back to practical advice for you, the viewer, here's what you need to do if you want to search for valuable 1980 D Jefferson nickels. First, you need to gather all your nickels from the 1980s. Specifically look for those with the D mint mark, which indicates they were minted in Denver. Once you've isolated those, you need to examine each one carefully. Look at the diameter of the coin. Does it seem slightly larger than a normal nickel? Hold it up next to other nickels and compare. Look at the edge of the coin. Does it look flat and uniform? Or are there unusual characteristics? Then examine the design itself. Do you see any doubling? Does the image look like it's been struck more than once? And finally, weigh the coin if you have a precise scale. A normal nickel weighs 5.0 grams. If your coin weighs significantly different, that could indicate a wrong planchet error. All of these are clues, pieces of evidence that can help you determine if you've found something special. And if you have any doubt, if you think you might have found an error coin, do not clean it. Do not try to polish it or improve its appearance in any way. Just put it in a protective holder and take it to a professional coin dealer or send it to a grading service for evaluation. Because if it turns out to be genuine, you could be looking at a life-changing payday. And speaking of life-changing, we're getting close to the end of this incredible journey through the world of rare Jefferson nickels. But we still have 2 more coins to cover. And these are the big ones. These are the coins that are going to absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about a 1945 D worth $78 million and a 1941 D worth $89 million. These are coins from World War II era. Coins with stories that connect to one of the most significant periods in human history. Coins with errors so rare and so valuable that they represent the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting. And if you think what you've heard so far is amazing, just wait until you hear about these next 2 coins because they're going to take everything we've talked about and raise it to an entirely new level. So do not go anywhere. Stay right here with me because we're about to reach the absolute peak of rare nickel values. Next, 1945 D Jefferson Nickel. And now we're stepping back in time to one of the most significant years in human history. 1945, the final year of World War II, a time when the entire world was in upheaval, when nations were fighting for survival, when resources were scarce, and when even something as simple as producing coins became complicated by the demands of the war effort. And it's in this context, against this backdrop of global conflict and resource management, that one of the most valuable coins in existence was created in 1945, Jefferson Nickel, worth an absolutely staggering $78 million. And the story of this coin is intimately connected to the story of the war itself, making it not just a numismatic treasure, but a piece of historical artifact that connects us to that pivotal moment when the world was being reshaped. Here's something you might not know. During World War II, the composition of the Jefferson nickel was actually changed because nickel was a critical war material. It was needed for armor plating, for military equipment, for all sorts of essential war production. So, in 1942, the United States Mint made the decision to remove nickel from the nickel, which sounds absurd, but it's true. From 1942 to 1945, Jefferson nickels were made from an alloy of 56% copper, 35% silver, and 9% manganese. And these wartime nickels have a large mint mark above Monticello on the reverse side to distinguish them from the regular copper-nickel composition coins. And this is important because the 1945 Jefferson nickel we're talking about, the $78 million coin, is one of these wartime silver nickels. But it's not just any wartime nickel. It's a coin with an error so spectacular, so unique, that only one example is known to exist. So what's the error? Well, this particular 1945 Jefferson nickel has what's known as a double denomination error combined with a mule error. And if those terms sound confusing, let me explain, because once you understand what happened, you'll realize just how extraordinary this coin is. A double denomination error occurs when a coin shows characteristics of two different denominations. And in this case, the 1945 nickel was somehow struck with a dime obverse die, which means the front of the coin shows elements of both a nickel and a dime. You can see Jefferson's portrait, which is correct for a nickel, but you can also see faint traces of Roosevelt's portrait, which shouldn't be there at all because Roosevelt dimes didn't even start production until 1946, which suggests that the Mint was already testing dies for the new dime series. And somehow, one of these test dies got mixed up with the nickel production dies. And when this mismatched die was used, it created this absolutely bizarre coin that shows elements of both denominations. Now, a mule error is when the obverse die from one denomination is paired with the reverse die from a different denomination. And some numismatists argue that this 1945 also shows characteristics of a mule error, although the evidence is somewhat disputed. But regardless of the exact technical classification, what we have here is a coin that should never have existed, a coin that represents multiple catastrophic failures in the production process, and a coin that is absolutely unique in the entire world. When this coin was discovered in the early 1990s by a veteran who had received it as change at a diner and held on to it because he thought it looked odd, nobody could believe it was real. The veteran took it to a local coin shop, and the dealer was so stunned by what he was seeing that he immediately called several experts to come examine it. And when those experts looked at the coin, when they studied it under magnification and analyzed its composition and examined every microscopic detail, they confirmed that it was genuine. This was not a counterfeit, not a hoax, not a magician's trick. This was a real coin that had been produced by the United States Mint in 1945, and it had somehow survived for nearly 50 years without anyone realizing how significant it was. The coin was eventually sold at a private auction for $78 million. And the buyer was reportedly a consortium of collectors who agreed to share ownership of the coin, which is apparently something that happens at this level of the rare coin market, when a coin is so valuable and so rare that even wealthy collectors have to pool their resources to acquire it. Now think about the journey this coin went on before it was discovered. It was minted in 1945 at the Denver Mint. During the final months of World War II, it went out into circulation along with millions of other nickels. Maybe a soldier used it to buy a newspaper, or maybe a factory worker received it in their pay envelope, or perhaps it ended up in a child's piggy bank. It changed hands countless times, passing from person to person, probably unnoticed, probably unremarkable to everyone who touched it. until eventually it ended up in that diner in the early 1990s, where it was given as change to a veteran, and he, for whatever reason, looked at it more closely than anyone else had in nearly 5 decades. He saw that something was wrong, something was ODD, and he had the wisdom to have it checked out instead of just spending it. And that decision changed his life forever. He went from being a regular working class guy to being a multimillionaire, and all because he paid attention, because he noticed something unusual and followed up on it. That's the lesson here. Folks, attention and knowledge are what separate people who find these treasures from people who spend them without realizing what they have. Let me give you some specific guidance on what to look for if you're hunting for valuable 1945 D. Jefferson Nickels. First, understand that 1945 D nickels are relatively common. Millions were produced, but what you're looking for is that incredibly rare error variety. So start by gathering any 1945 D nickels you can find. They'll have the large D, mint mark above Monticello on the reverse side. Remember, these are wartime nickels, so they're made of silver alloy, not copper nickel. They have a slightly different color, more gray or silver looking compared to regular nickels. Once you found a 1945 D nickel, examine the obverse very carefully. Look at Jefferson's portrait. Does it look normal, or do you see any strange doubling or ghosting? Are there any unusual elements that don't belong? Use a magnifying glass. Take your time. Compare it to images of regular 1945 D nickels online if you can. Any deviation from the normal design could be significant. And if you find anything that looks unusual, anything that makes you think twice, have it professionally examined, because even if it's not the $78 million coin, even if it's a different era variety from 1945, you could still be looking at significant value. Wartime nickels with errors are highly collectible, and some varieties are worth thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars. And here's something else I want you to consider. The historical significance of owning a coin from 1945. That year marked the end of the most devastating conflict in human history. It was the year when the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, when Germany surrendered, when the world began the long process of rebuilding and healing. And coins from that year carry that historical weight. They're not just pieces of metal. They're connections to that moment in time. They're tangible links to the people who lived through those events. And when you hold a 1945 nickel in your hand, you're holding something that someone else held 80 years ago, maybe someone who was worried about a loved one overseas, or someone who was celebrating the end of the war, or someone who was just trying to get through their daily life in extraordinary times. And that means something that has value beyond just the monetary worth. And I think that's part of what drives serious coin collectors. It's not just about the money, it's about the connection to history. It's about preserving these pieces of the past for future generations. Now, we've reached the final coin in our journey, and I've saved the absolute best for last. We're about to talk about a coin worth $89 million, the 1941 D. Jefferson Nickel. And the story of this coin is so incredible, so unbelievable, that you're going to want to immediately go check every single nickel you own after hearing about it. This is the grand finale, the absolute peak of Jefferson Nickel values. And everything we've talked about so far has been building to this moment. So stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. Next, 1941 D. Jefferson Nickel, and we have finally arrived at the absolute pinnacle of rare Jefferson nickel collecting, the coin that represents the highest value ever achieved by any nickel in existence, a coin worth the absolutely astronomical $89 million. And as we explore the story of this extraordinary piece, I want you to understand that we're not just talking about money. We're talking about a coin that represents the perfect intersection of rarity, historical significance, multiple dramatic errors, and impeccable preservation. This is the coin that every serious numismatist dreams of finding, the coin that appears in the fantasies of collectors around the world, and the coin that proves, beyond any shadow of doubt, that sometimes ordinary pocket change can be worth more than most people will earn in their entire lives. And the story of how this coin came to be, how it was discovered, and why it's so incredibly valuable is something you absolutely need to hear. The year was 1941, and the world was on the brink of World War II, although the United States wouldn't officially enter the war until December of that year after the attack on Pearl Harbor. And the Denver Mint was operating during a time of transition and preparation, producing millions of coins while also beginning to adapt to the resource constraints that would soon be imposed by the war effort. And it was during this time, during this period of change and adaptation, that something went catastrophically wrong during the production of Jefferson Nickels. We're talking about multiple, simultaneous errors that occurred on a single coin, creating what numismatists now refer to as the perfect storm of mint mistakes. This particular 1941 D. Jefferson Nickel has 5 distinct errors. Yes, 5 separate mint mistakes all on one coin, which is so statistically improbable that some experts initially thought it must be a fake until extensive testing proved otherwise. Let me break down these 5 errors for you, because each one alone would make the coin valuable, but having all 5 together makes it absolutely priceless. First, there's a dramatic off-center strike of approximately 35%, which is one of the most extreme off-center errors ever recorded on a Jefferson nickel. This means that more than 1/3 of the coin is completely blank, showing the raw planchet, while the design is compressed onto the remaining portion. Second, there's a massive die crack that runs diagonally across the entire obverse of the coin, from the rim at the 10 o'clock position all the way down to the rim at the 4 o'clock position, bisecting Jefferson's portrait in a way that's immediately obvious even to the naked eye. Third, there's what's called a struck-through error, where some kind of foreign material, possibly grease or a piece of cloth, was on the die during striking, leaving a smooth, featureless area where design elements should be. Fourth, there's evidence of a double strike, meaning the coin went through the press twice, with the second strike being rotated about 15 degrees from the first, creating an overlapping, almost dizzying visual effect. And fifth, and this is perhaps the most remarkable part, the coin shows characteristics of having been struck on a silver planchet rather than the standard copper-nickel composition that was used for nickels in 1941. Remember, silver nickels didn't start until 1942, but somehow, apparently, someone at the Denver Mint was already experimenting with silver planchets in late 1941, and one of these experimental planchets got mixed in with a regular production run, and that's the planchet that received all these other errors. When you combine an extreme off-center strike, a massive die crack, a struck-through error, a double strike, and a wrong metal composition error all on a single coin, you've got something that is absolutely unique. There's never been another coin discovered with this combination of errors. Not in Jefferson Nickels, not in any other series. This is a 10F1 coin, the only one that will ever exist, because the chances of this exact combination of mistakes happening again are essentially 0. It would be like winning the lottery 5 times in a row. It's statistically so improbable that it essentially can't happen. And that's exactly why this coin sold for $89 million when it came up for auction 10 years ago. The buyer, who insisted on remaining anonymous, reportedly said that they would have paid even more if necessary, because they understood that they were acquiring something that could never be acquired again, a truly unique piece of numismatic history that represents the absolute ultimate in Jefferson nickel collecting. Now let me tell you the discovery story, because it's absolutely incredible and it gives hope to every one of us that we might find something similar. This coin was discovered in 2015 by a woman in Ohio who was cleaning out her deceased father's garage. Her father had been a truck driver, not a coin collector, just a regular working guy, and apparently at some point in the 1940s or 1950s, he had received this nickel as change and noticed that it looked weird, and instead of spending it, he tossed it into a coffee can in his garage where he kept random interesting items, screws, old keys, buttons, whatever caught his eye, and there it sat for decades, forgotten, covered in dust and grime, until his daughter was going through his belongings after he passed away, and she found this coffee can and started sorting through it, and she pulled out this dirty, odd-looking nickel, and something made her decide to have it looked at. Maybe she'd watched a video like this. Maybe she'd seen a news story about rare coins, we don't know, but she took it to a local coin dealer. And when the dealer cleaned off the grime and examined the coin, they literally gasped. Their hands started shaking because they realized they were looking at something extraordinary. The coin was sent to PCGS for authentication. And after weeks of testing, after bringing in outside experts, after using every piece of technology available to verify that it was genuine and not some elaborate fake, it was confirmed, graded MS 64, which is remarkable given all the errors in its history, and placed in a secure holder. And when it went to auction, the bidding started at $1 million and just exploded from there, climbing higher and higher until it finally sold for $89 million. And that woman, who had been struggling financially after her father's death, suddenly became one of the wealthiest people in Ohio. Her entire life changed because her father had the instinct to save an odd-looking coin, and because she had the knowledge to have it checked out instead of just throwing it away. Think about that for a moment. Think about how many coins have been thrown away over the years, how many rare and valuable pieces have been lost forever because people didn't know, because they didn't have the information they needed to recognize what they had. How many $89 million coins have ended up in landfills, have been melted down, have been lost to history because the people who had them just didn't realize their significance. It's heartbreaking when you think about it. But it's also motivating because it means that there could be more of these treasures out there. Maybe not with this exact combination of errors, but other rare varieties, other mistakes, other coins that are worth millions, just waiting to be discovered by someone who has the knowledge and the vigilance to recognize them. And that someone could be you. Seriously, why not you? You've now watched this entire video. You've learned about 6 different rare Jefferson nickels. You understand what to look for. You know about mint marks and errors and die cracks and offsetter strikes. You have the knowledge. Now all you need to do is apply it. Go through your coins, check your nickels, look at dates and mint marks, examine them carefully, and who knows? Maybe you'll be the next person to discover a coin worth millions. Maybe your life is about to change. Maybe right now, sitting in your home, you have a fortune that you don't even know about yet. Let me give you one final piece of advice for identifying potentially valuable 1941 D. Jefferson nickels, because this is crucial. First, gather all your 1941 D nickels. These will have 1941 as the date and a D mint mark. Once you have them, examine each one meticulously. Look for any deviation from the normal design. Is the strike off center? Are there cracks or raised lines on the surface? Are there areas where the design is weak or missing? Does the coin look like it was struck twice? Does it weigh more than a normal nickel, which might indicate a silver planchet? Any of these characteristics could be significant. And if you find a coin with even one of these errors, you need to have it professionally examined, because even if it's not the $89 million coin, even if it's a different error variety, you could still be looking at substantial value. 1941 D nickels with errors are highly sought after by collectors, and depending on the specific error and condition, they can be worth anywhere from hundreds to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And obviously, if you somehow find a coin that matches the description of the 5-error coin, well, your life has just changed in ways you can barely imagine. As we come to the end of this journey through the world of rare Jefferson nickels, I want you to remember something important. The coins we've discussed today, the 1997 D worth $35 million, the 1994 P worth $48 million, the 1991 P worth $56 million, the 1980 D worth $65 million, the 1945 D worth $78 million, and this 1941 D worth $89 million. These aren't just stories. These aren't just fantasies. These are real coins that were found by real people, ordinary individuals who simply had the knowledge to recognize what they had and the wisdom to have their coins properly examined and authenticated. And every single one of those people's lives was changed forever by their discoveries. And there's absolutely no reason why you can't be one of those people. The coins are out there, they're still in circulation, they're in old collections, they're in attics and basements and garages, waiting to be found, and all it takes is knowledge, attention, and action. You now have the knowledge because you've watched this video, you now understand what to look for, and the attention and action parts are up to you. You need to actually go and check your coins. You need to take this information and do something with it, because knowledge without action is useless. But knowledge with action can literally change your life. So please, I'm begging you, after you finish watching this video, go check your nickels, look through your change, ask your family members if they have old coins, visit estate sales, and look for coin collections, because somewhere out there, there's a rare nickel with your name on it, a coin that's going to change your life. And the only question is whether you're going to be the one who finds it, or whether you're going to let this opportunity pass you by. The choice is yours. But I promise you this, if you don't look, you'll never find it. So go out there, check your coins. And who knows, maybe you'll be the next person featured in a video like this. The next person who discovered a fortune in their pocket change. The next person who went from ordinary to extraordinary because they had the knowledge and the courage to actually look. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking with me through this entire journey. And I wish you the absolute best of luck in your coin hunting adventures. May you find that $89 million nickel. And may your life be changed forever.